saw three major tight end moves so far, and actually four if you want to count Eric Ebron to the Steelers. We'll touch on that one quickly as well at the end. But the first one, this was a big splash. It was Austin Hooper right when free agency opened up. He signed with the Cleveland Browns for a 4-year, $42 million deal. $23 million of that is guaranteed. This makes him the highest paid tight end in the NFL. Steph, you're the Browns fan here. You tell me. Are you excited for Austin Hooper? Do you like this signing for Cleveland? What do you think this does for that Cleveland offense from an NFL perspective? And then do you have any interest in Hooper from a fantasy perspective in 2020?
So I think the biggest takeaway from this is looking at the offense that Kevin Stefanski wants to run in Cleveland. Now, before I get into this, let me preface by saying we shouldn't just copy and paste the formations and the scheme from the Vikings right over to the Browns. I see a lot of people doing that. Same thing with people with McCarthy stepping in for the Cowboys. They're trying to take the previous production that he saw with a totally different personnel group, a totally different offense in terms of their strengths and weaknesses. So I don't want to read too far into this, but one thing that when I say these stats, I think it'll demonstrate the point a little bit more. So we look at the Vikings in 2019. They ran 18% of their plays out of the 11 personnel. So that's one running back, 3 wide receivers, and 1 tight end. That is the lowest in the league by far. 18% is extremely low. The second lowest is 30%. Okay, wow. So they very rarely, if ever, ran single tight end sets with 3 wide receivers out wide. We look at their 12 personnel, which is 2 wide receivers and 2 tight ends. They love to hand the ball off to Dalvin Cook. So you got to think a lot of this is from running or play action. They ran that at a 35% rate. So that's second highest in the entire league, only behind the San Francisco 49ers, and we know how much they love to run the ball. So I expect a lot of 2 tight end sets to be run in Cleveland. And we look at Cleveland in 2019, they ran about 53% of their plays with that 11 personnel. I expect that to drop significantly. So they're right around middle of the pack in terms of running 1 tight end sets. I think they're going to run a ton more 2 tight end sets now that they have Hooper and Njoku. And they also ran the 20 personnel, which is the 2 running back, 3 wide receiver formation. That's kind of a reflection of the Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt combo, most in the league at 7%. So I expect that to kind of stay the same. I think they're going to want to utilize both Chubb and Hunt just because they're both fantastic playmakers. But I do think we're going to see a lot more 2 tight end sets from Cleveland. So we look at the implications from that. Yes, I think Hooper has value. I think he has less than he does in Atlanta. I think the volume will be a bit lower because Atlanta loves to throw. They threw the most in 2019, so I definitely expect that to go down. But Baker does love to target the tight end in the red zone, and I think that's where Hooper is going to continue to make his hay, just like he did in Atlanta. I do like him as an option, just kind of bumping him down a little bit, but I think for the Browns offense as a whole, for Odell Beckham, for Jarvis Landry, for Baker certainly, and then you look at both the running backs, they're all taking an uptick from this just based on the scheme, and it seems like there finally is a clear direction of how they want this offense to run in 2020 in Cleveland. So, a lot of the ambiguity and difficulty that we had in what is Freddie Kitchens doing, I don't even think he knew the answer to that question in 2019 at times. So, to me, this is kind of like the Panthers, where we just see a new piece come in to bring stability. And it tells us as fantasy players a lot of what we can look forward to. And we've already had reports come out and say Stefanski's going to want to run the ball just as often as they did in Minnesota, bringing that same scheme over. So, I love it as a Browns fan. I don't love it for Hooper, as much as a fantasy option, but one that does get me excited. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, those are some really good points. I love what you added, just about the offensive personnel, and it seems like to me that it's just back on the Cleveland hype train. It feels like last offseason was like, oh, they got all these weapons, they got Odell, they got Kareem Hunt, and now I just feel like we're back to that exact narrative where it's like, oh, they got Odell and Jarvis Landry. They got Austin Hooper now and David Njoku. They've got Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. They're too deep at all the skill positions with absolute stud playmakers. And to me, it all falls on Baker Mayfield now. This is kind of like last-ditch effort for Baker, if you will. They bring in the new coaching staff, which I think is going to help him a ton. They bring in a tight end for him to throw to, an elite receiving tight end, which I think should help him a ton. And I do expect Baker to improve over last year and succeed in this offense. But man, if he doesn't, he is going to be on the hot seat for sure. I believe they brought in Case Keenum to be his backup. I don't read too much into that. I think, the money-wise, it was pretty standard for a veteran, seasoned backup who has started before. But to me, it's like Stefanski and Case Keenum have some ties, and, I don't think there's like a threat to Baker Mayfield's starting job this season. But if the wheels come off again, like, the Baker experiment could be over faster than we think, especially just given the weapons that they have. So from a fantasy perspective, though, I agree with you. I think Hooper still has value. I think he's somewhere, from tight end 6 to tight end 8. He was actually running as tight end 1 for a while in 2019 before he got hurt. So I think he's still a very startable tight end. He's going to be maybe have some inconsistency, but should be able to score a decent amount of touchdowns, should be in the 8 to 10 touchdown range at the tight end position. And he also is really elite from a receptions and a receiving yard standpoint. We've seen him just rack up receptions in Atlanta. It seemed like every game last season he was getting 7 for 70 yards minimum. So I do think he's still startable. And then, like you said, I agree with you 100% here. The rest of that Cleveland offense should take a step up. It should help Baker a lot. It should make him streamable, which we didn't really see out of him last season. And hopefully it takes some pressure off of Odell and Jarvis and allows them to get some more openings downfield. And I think really just the coaching staff in general is going to really turn the tide for Cleveland. It was a train wreck last season. We all saw it firsthand, and they still were able to win a couple games. So I think, the sky is the limit again for Cleveland this season. And because of what happened last year, a lot of people are sleeping on them when in reality, like, all the young pieces, all the talent is still there. They have a coaching staff that knows what they're doing now. So, for me, I'm not super excited about Hooper, but I'm more keeping an eye on Baker and some of those other pieces in this offense.
The only other thing I'll say is all the Njoku believers, I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. He's not going to become, a huge, top 5 tight end option. Those few guys, maybe it's like 3 of them. They're a little bit sad by this signing. But let's go ahead and move on to the next one.
One is David Njoku himself.
That's right. Well, let's talk about the position now being filled in by Hayden Hurst as the tight end for the Atlanta Falcons. So we see Austin Hooper leave. He finished as the tight end 6 in 2019. Had 75 receptions on 97 targets for 787 yards and 6 touchdowns. I do expect the volume to come down. I've kind of already thrown that out there as the Falcons threw the most in the NFL in 2019. But regardless, I think Hurst could, be in that range. We saw him be productive and show a lot of flashes in Baltimore. There wasn't a ton of receiving volume for him as they really looked at Mark Andrews as the tight end 1 there and Hurst as a 2 or maybe even a 3 behind Boyle at different times in terms of their receiving chops. But I do like this for Hurst as a fantasy option. I do like it for the Falcons. Just kind of wait to continue to rotate guys in that talent into that tight end spot and still be able to keep that offense on schedule. So in terms of not giving up a ton of cap and just keeping a playmaker in at the tight end position, I think it was a smart move for them. Alex, what do you think for Hurst in this offense from a fantasy perspective? Are you putting him as a tight end 1?
Yeah, I have him as, close to that tight end 1 range. I think he certainly has top 12 potential, especially with the tight end landscape that's just been fairly weak over the past few seasons and fairly top heavy. So it's interesting, though. They traded Hayden Hurst and a 2020 4th-round pick for a 2020 2nd-round pick and a 5th-round pick. So you look at this, and the Ravens almost got as much for Hayden Hurst that the Texans did for DeAndre Hopkins, which is just it's a sad story. You hate to see it. It's a really tough scene for Houston fans everywhere, so we'll keep you in our thoughts and prayers, Houston. But, yeah, from a fantasy perspective, I think it's great for Hayden Hurst. I think this was a brilliant move by Atlanta as well. And Hurst is a guy who was a first-round pick just a couple seasons ago, so he's got the talent. He obviously had the draft pedigree to be featured in an offense. So, I think the Falcons should not have signed Hooper to that deal he got. It was a big deal, and it's great for Hooper. And I think, like we just talked about, it's going to be great for Cleveland as well. But it just didn't really make sense for this Falcons team. They're trying to save cap, not really spend. We saw him cut Devontae Freeman in a move to save some cap space and then bring on Todd Gurley. So For me, I think it's a great move for everyone involved, and I think Hayden Hurst is going to definitely see some increased target volume than he did in Baltimore this past season, and he could be a guy who could be a sneaky tight end one. And he's a guy, if you're stacked at receiver and you're stacked at running back, you can probably roll him out at tight end and hope he gets 5 for 50 yards and maybe he sneaks in a touchdown, which a couple seasons ago is really how Austin Hooper kind of broke onto the scene as Matt Ryan continued to build that rapport with him. We saw him break out. So maybe this season is kind of just like a transition year for Hayden Hurst, and he shows some flashes, and he's still so young. Maybe he still has that upside to break out in the future. So on the Ravens side of this deal, I'm bumping up Mark Andrews slightly. Lamar Jackson loves targeting those tight ends. Bringing Hayden Hurst out of the picture should mean maybe some more touchdown volume when they get down near the goal line for Mark Andrews. So a great trade for both sides. I think the Ravens will use that second round pick. They have a lot of needs. Maybe they pick up a wide receiver with that pick as they move forward.
So let's move over to another move, and this one's going to be kind of gross to talk about on the surface, but I think there is some points that we discussed here.
I was really surprised you even had this one as a talking point. It
really
seems so insignificant.
The only point I want to make is a tight end that I'm now targeting as whether it's a sleeper, or I'm sure he won't be a sleeper by the time we get to draft season. With Jason Witten signing a 1-year deal with the Raiders, I don't expect Jason Witten to be the starter. He's going to be fighting for the tight end 2 position behind Waller. Honestly, to me, I'm putting him even behind Foster Moreau. We'll just see how Gruden wants to run that offense and the personnel he wants to include. Really, the biggest takeaway for me, though, is Blake Jarwin, who the Cowboys now just extended. He's now at a 4-year contract, and with the new coach in there. So it feels to me like Blake Jarwin's going to have a pretty strong role in the Cowboys offense, and you have vacated 83 vacated targets from Jason Witten, another 83 vacated targets from Randall Cobb. I do expect them to bring in another wide receiver 3 weapon, but still, I'm circling Blake Jarwin. I mean, I will certainly have my eyes on him as we move over to the draft season. That's really the only takeaway that I had. Nothing in terms on the Jason Witten side, but just wanted to throw that out there. Alex, you may think I'm on crack right now. What are your thoughts?
No, it's worth throwing out there. I think for the Raiders, the Witten signing, it's great to have that veteran presence in the locker room and on the field. Even if in a limited role, Jason Witten is a class act, and he's a guy who's going to provide a lot of leadership for that team. They have the all Monday Night Football broadcaster team now with Gruden and Jason Witten united, so maybe Gruden can give him some pointers if he ever wants to get back on Monday Night Football again. But yeah, I think Blake Jarwin's a great call. He has the opportunity to get up to 80 to 100 targets this season. Like you just said, Witten has 83 targets gone. Cobb has 83 targets that are gone. Jarwin easily could get to that 80-100 target range, which puts him in consideration for a tight end 8 to tight end 10 based on the volume he gets. In the final game of the 2018 season, we saw a huge burst from Blake Jarwin out of nowhere. He had 7 catches for 119 yards and 3 touchdowns in one game. So we've seen maybe that was just one flash in the pan, but he's proven that he can be effective in the passing game before if the volume is there. He's another guy along with Hayden Hurst that could be really good sleepers this season and potential breakouts late in drafts.
Absolutely. And one more tight end that we need to talk about here is Eric Ebron, who got signed to the Steelers. I think this is a great move by the Steelers. Ebron, feels like he hasn't been able to reach his potential quite yet, but he showed a lot of great flashes in Indianapolis. Had so many clutch plays there. I remember one where he's back of the end zone, toe tapping to save the game as the clock's running out. I loved Ebron as a fit for the Colts, just with how much they use the tight end and 2 tight end sets. I think his outlook really stays the same. Maybe a higher ceiling, just as he'll kind of be the de facto tight end 1 for Pittsburgh. But Alex, what are your thoughts here on the Ebron situation?
I actually really like it for Eric Ebron. I mean, RIP Vance McDonald's fantasy value. That's something that is gone and will never be coming back. But I think it's a great move for Pittsburgh, and it's a really good career move for Eric Ebron. Like you said, I think the ceiling goes up. There's going to be a lot more passing volume in this offense. Ben Roethlisberger has had valuable tight ends in the past with what was that guy's name? It was Miller. Let me spot check that really quick. But Ben Roethlisberger has used the tight end very effectively in the past, and Eric Ebron is Jesse James and Vance McDonald a couple seasons ago, but I'm thinking even farther back than that. Maybe it's Heath Miller. Maybe that was before Ben Roethlisberger's time. Maybe I'm a little bit mixed up here. But I just think it's a great move for Eric Ebron. We've seen the touchdown upside he's provided in the past. We've seen him be really effective. He led the NFL in receiving touchdowns at the tight end position a couple seasons back when he had Andrew Luck. So I think it's a great move for Pittsburgh too. Bring Ben Roethlisberger back. You still have that Antonio Brown sized hole on that offense, and you've got Juju Smith-Schuster who's stepping up. Deontay Johnson showed a lot of promise in that offense last season as a rookie, so you've got a field stretcher as well. They still have James Washington, and then you throw Eric Ebron as a big body target in the mix with James Conner out of the backfield, and that's a really good combination. So I think it's a great signing, and Eric Ebron, maybe he has some spot start appeal in fantasy. I don't know how consistent it's going to be. I don't know what his receptions, his yards, his target volume is going to look like. Pittsburgh is a little bit up in the air right now from a fantasy perspective because we're 1 year removed from Ben Roethlisberger, so we're not really sure how that's going to look. It's really going to be our first look at the Steelers with Ben Roethlisberger without AB in quite some time. So, Big Ben is saying he's throwing without pain for the first time in a long time. So maybe he's feeling great. I've seen some videos and some pictures of Ben Roethlisberger lately, and it looks like he's straight out of Middle Earth from Lord of the Rings. So he's definitely been hibernating a little bit, carbon up for the season and getting ready. So we'll see what happens. But it's a great signing for both sides. And to spot check myself, Heath Miller, tight end for the Pittsburgh Steelers, saw 81 targets back in the 2015 regular season. So I don't know why I spaced straight back to 2015, but Big Ben has liked to use the tight end, but hasn't really been, a Tom Brady level from targeting the tight end in the past. So Eric Ebron definitely has some upside, but not a guy I'm getting super excited about on draft day as a sleeper.
Certainly like it for their offense. Maybe we see Big Ben have a couple more years in him. I know he's on his last contract with, the light at the end of the tunnel right now is retirement for him. So would love to see him have a high-powered, strong passing attack offense to kind of send him out of Pittsburgh before he reaches retirement.
Steph, out of all these guys we've talked about, really quickly, we'll leave Hooper out of this because I think he'd be the obvious choice. But between Eric Ebron, Hayden Hurst, and Blake Jarwin, which one would you rather have in fantasy football in 2020?
Well, I think right now I got to say Hayden Hurst, but that could change by the time the season comes around. I just love the volume for him. Yeah. No volume is guaranteed for Jarwin. I don't even know what the volume is going to look like for Ebron. With all the other weapons that they have, I see Hurst as being that third wide receiver with a team that throws it as much and as often as the Falcons do with Matt Ryan. Hurst is the standout to me. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think Blake Jarwin would probably be my number 2, and then Eric Ebron third. But I'm with you. I think Hayden Hurst has a lot of potential in that Atlanta offense.